In this video, we're going to cover some of the basics of the Niagara particle systems. Our goal is to make two different particles. We're going to make one that's an atmospheric particle that kind of looks like floating like fireflies or dust or glowing balls. They're kind of just throughout our world. And then we're going to talk about how we can make a particle that plays as a jump when our character jumps into the air. All right, so we're going to go to our content drawer. I am going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call it Niagara Systems right here. I'm going to open it up. And I'm going to either add here, or I'm just going to right-click right here and create the Niagara system. These systems really are super versatile in your games. They're a great way to add just kind of visual effects to your game. You can use them to add feedback to your game. There's all sorts of ways these can use in very creative ways. This tutorial, again, is just showing kind of the basics, how to make a couple of these. But there's plenty of other videos out there, plenty of other resources out there that you can find useful in making your game look how you want it to look. From here, for this first system, we're actually going to create an empty system. So the way these systems work is we make our system, and I'm going to call it NS for Niagara system. I'm going to call it glow. It's going to be kind of these glowing balls that are throughout my world. I'm going to open up. So I'm in my system. I'm going to bring it over to here. Once I'm in a system, I have to have an emitter, and then within those emitters, I have these different modules that control how my system works. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to click Add Emitter. It then asks me what type of system I want to start with right here. All of these have different, very like visual ways that could show how your system would work. A lot of them can be used, and not just the way that it looks right here, but actually in very different ways based on how you use the modules. We want these particles to just kind of hang around our world, so we're going to create these hanging particulates emitter right here. So I'm going to add that. Once I do that, you can actually see it starts to populate my preview with this particle system. What I also like to do at this point is I like to take that system and drag it into my world. I'm going to put it on top of this platform so I know where it is. And then I can start to get a relative feel for how this is going to look in my world. I kind of actually like this effect. This kind of shows that this platform has something important on it. It's a good way to give feedback to the player. But you can see also it doesn't extend past that area down here. So we're going to work through how we can start to adjust some of the settings to this. Back to my system. I generally like to work from the top down. So I'm going to start with my emitter state right here. This is going to change how long this loop is lasting for my emitter, whether it is going to loop or be a single play, like our jump's going to be single instead of infinite. I'm pretty okay with how this is set up right here, so I'm going to leave it. I can then go to my spawn rate. This is going to control how many of these particles are spawning over time. So if I increase this value to like 200, we'll say, you'll see there'll be more of these that start to pop up. I always like to work in extremes, right? Start at the extreme end, the high end, go to the low end, and find a value that works in between. So if I even bump this up even more to like 2,000, you start to see I have lots of particles in here. I can get a feel for what that looks like in my game by getting a little closer. So I don't not like that. I think that looks fine. I'm just not sure if that meets the purpose of what I'm going for. It definitely would really take over my atmosphere having this effect. This is also a good way to start getting going on like a snow effect possibly, or I could start moving it to make like a sand or wind effect. But again, we're working on this kind of atmospheric glowing ball, almost like lightning bugs. So I'm going to we'll try like 200. I was pretty okay with that. And we can always adjust this as time goes on, as you saw. Working my way down, I have my initialized particle. This is a good one. I can start to say, hey, each of these little particles that are spawning, what's their life cycle? Currently, they're set to be between 5 and 8 seconds. I sometimes like the effect of like 1 to 3 because they kind of like blink in and blink out a little bit quicker. That kind of reminds me of lightning bugs a little bit more. Again, you could try the other extreme. I can go like 10 to 15. And what's going to happen, all these ones that spawn, they're going to be hanging around for a long time. 15 seconds in a video game is a very long time. So again, one of these isn't right or wrong. It just depends on what the effect that you're going for. I'm going to go 1 to 3. I can then start to play around with the color mode right here. I want mine to have this kind of yellow color to it. That looks pretty good to me. I can hit OK. I'll go back into my game. I'll start to see what that looks like. Not too bad. kind of bothering me. This is going through the floor down here, so I might want to raise it a little bit. We'll talk about the shape of our emitter in a second. Oh, I think I like it a little bit lower now. But again, a lot of this is trial and error and adjusting it to meet what you are trying to create, the effect that you're going for. All right, back to my emitter. I could play around with this color right here and like this V value. If I make it a higher value, it'll actually start to glow a little bit within there. You could actually remake a material for your emitter and have it be an emissive material, but this is a nice, easy way to kind of get a little bit of a glow working with your particles. And I like what that looks like so far. Other items within this initialize, I have my size. I can make them bigger. So right now it's at 2 to 3.5. I could go like 5 to 10. Now when these spawn, they're pretty big. And again, I don't not like that. I just don't think that's the effect I'm going for. So back to my emitter. We'll go 1 to 3. Some variety is good. I'll maybe go a little bit smaller on the low end, 0.5 to 3. And I'm not going to go through all of these in here, but my best recommendation would be to work your way through these, see what they look like, see how they impact your project to make the effect that you're going for. Down to shape location. This one's fairly useful. Our shape is currently set to be a box right here, and then the box is given a size. If I make this box bigger, it is going to have my particles take over a much larger area within your project. And it looks like I have just about the entire map covered. One thing to point out right here, my spawn rate is now spread out over my entire box, so it looks like there's a lot fewer of these particles happening. I often think less is more with some of these particles. Kind of a nice subtle particle will go a long way versus having just like you being overwhelmed by your particles. Personally, I think I could use a little bit more, so I'm going to go back to spawn rate. I'm going to increase this. I'm going to double it up. We'll go 400. Go back to my game. And there's a little bit more going on right there. Perfect. Other shapes that can be useful within my particle, my shape location. You know, I could have it spawn like a cylinder within here. So it's kind of this cylinder shape. You can see what that looks like in my world over here. I think of this as almost like a power-up area you're trying to go to, or some sort of end goal or checkpoint that you're trying to get through. We have torus right here is really useful. This looks like a ring. You know, I could think of this as almost like a launch pad. I could think of it almost like a teleport area, some sort of power-up area within my project. A really useful shape for this. Each of these shapes do have their own settings too, where you can play with the radius of them if you would like, or really just kind of adjust the size of them. So anyway, all of this is up to you to kind of trial and error your way to see what you like. We'll go back to 25. Ring and disc is kind of similar, just kind of like a flatter version. I always think of this as being like you're casting a spell maybe in here. There's even a hexagon shape to this, which I really see that being useful for. And then we have the cone. Sometimes like the cone for like smoke coming off of a fire. Just kind of another versatile shape for you to work through. I'm going to go back to my box. It's set to 2000. I think I'm in a pretty good spot right here. Now there are some other effects within here that you could check out. You could play around with like the wind of my particles. If I set this to be a higher value, my particles are really kind of floating in and out a little bit more. You know, I could play around with the drag, the scale, the sprite size. These charts are awesome because you can create more dynamic visuals to it. So this would be the scale, the size, where it goes from 0 to 1. It kind of lingers around 1 and starts to flicker a little bit lower. I could have that flicker happen sooner in size by pulling this down right here. Or there's some kind of template-based graphs right here that you could play around with as well. Same with the color right here, where I could try to play around with like the RGB or the transparency of it. So I could have it maybe become fully visible sooner and start to fade away from there. Honestly, it kind of just goes to like the effect that you're working for with this, whatever effect that you're looking for. Back to my project. This is what I have. So I have this nice, subtle kind of floating fireflies moving around. I don't know if I love how fast they're kind of twirling due to the wind, but I do like that they're not too overwhelming, right? This coupled with maybe like a darker level, and maybe I'm in some sort of forest, really add a visual effect to my project. So this was how we can use these Niagara systems to create these atmospheric particles. In the next video, we're going to look at how we can make more of an action-based particle system.